Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before our meeting begins tonight, we will have an invocation which I will offer since Mr. Meinzer is not able to make it, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. And since I only learned about 5 minutes ago I was going to do this invocation, I went quickly and I settled on this one, which I really like, and I want to attribute it to is Archbishop Charles J. Caput. And this was delivered originally to the Philadelphia City Council meeting on October 20, 2011. And he said as follows: Teddy Roosevelt was a man who had a reputation for being frank and direct. In 1990, a year before he entered the White House, he wrote these words: "No community is healthy where it is ever necessary to distinguish one politician from his fellows or her fellows because he or she is not honest. Moreover, it is not enough that a public official should be honest. No amount of honesty will avail if he or she is also not brave and wise. The weakling and the coward cannot be saved by honesty alone." And the bishop went on to say, "Leadership requires two virtues that seem very simple until they become very inconvenient: honesty and courage. All of you here, my colleagues, have earned the right to be here today by winning the trust of the people of Sandusky. But along with that honor comes a duty of humility, integrity, and public service. So let's settle our hearts for just a moment in prayer. God of justice and mercy, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve the people of our city. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us and treat all persons, no matter how weak or poor, with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of the human person. We ask this as your sons and daughters, confident in your goodness and love. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Cresser, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Murray? Ms. Twine?
Here.
Mr. Waddington?
Here.
Mr. Poole?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Yeah.
Commissioners, we have two colleagues who are absent tonight, and I wonder if someone might care to make a motion to excuse Mr. Brady and Mr. Meinzer.
So moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. I feel like the poltergeist back in the seat. I'm back. And I must explain that Mr. Brady is not able to be here because he says that he's having a granddaughter down in Columbus. And despite the number of times that I assured him that that was not possibly the case, that his granddaughter was going to be bearing a far larger share of the labor, I resisted, and he can be a little resolute. So he's down in Columbus having a grandson, I think. Yes. So we'll proceed with what may be a short agenda tonight. Commissioners, you have before you the minutes of our meetings of July 26th and August 2021. Will someone care to make a motion?
So move.
I make a motion, we accept the minutes as written, and we don't have to read them.
Second.
So there's motion and second. Discussion. Without objection, the motion is approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved. I got a little rusty there. I'll get back on the bike here in a second.
I'm always rusty.
So it's like time for audience participation. I don't see a lot of our fellow citizens here. It must be a dull agenda that has driven them away, or maybe it's the bad production qualities or the bad acting, I'm not sure. But is there anyone present who wishes to address the commission on any of the agenda items? Seeing none. Ms. Cresser, do we have any comments from members of the public that we received by email?
Mr. President, no, I did not.
Okay. Commissioners, then we have a proclamation, which I believe Ms. Twine is going to deliver.
Yes, sir. This proclamation we do every year, and it basically is reminding people not to drive under the influence. So we, of course, want everyone to think about that every single time they get in the car. But we will do a special recognition this time with the proclamation. So whereas from August 18th through September 6, 2021, law enforcement nationwide will be joining the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over Impaired Driving Awareness Campaign. And whereas during the 2019 Labor Day period, there were 451 crash fatalities nationwide, and 38% of those fatalities involved a drunk driver. And whereas on average, more than 10,000 people were killed each year from 2015 to 2019, and one person was killed in a drunk driving crash every 52 minutes in 2019. And whereas this Labor Day weekend, the Sandusky Police Department will be participating in the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign to get the message out that drunk driving is not only illegal, it takes lives and is simply not worth the risk. And whereas in support of the law enforcement community's dedication to protecting the lives of residents in their communities, officers will be working together during this holiday weekend and to take drunk drivers off the roads. And whereas research has shown that high visibility enforcement like the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign reduces drunk driving fatalities, and by joining this nationwide effort, Sandusky's roadways will be made safer for everyone throughout the Labor Day period. And whereas the Sandusky Police Department wants to remind citizens that it is never okay to drink and drive, and if you plan to drink alcohol, designate a sober driver or plan to use public transportation or ride service to get home safely. And now therefore, I, Naomi Twine of the Sandusky City Commission, do hereby proclaim and announce August 18th through September 6, 2021 as plan ahead this Labor Day holiday, Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over weeks in the city of Sandusky, and urge all citizens to drive sober and travel safely. Dated this 9th day of August 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner Twine. 8 years in a row.
Dick thinks I have this memorized.
Does he? Well, I think you might be right. But you wanted to get it right, so that's important. Thank you. Commissioners, we have some communications from staff recommending various pieces of legislation. Would someone care to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Then a motion to accept the communications and a second. Discussion? Without objection, the motion will be approved, and hearing no objection, the motion is approved. Mrs. Cresser, since we do not have a consent agenda tonight, would you present item number 1, please?
Yes, item number 1 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a first amendment to the agreement with Steve and Tammy Hammer, doing business as Sandusky Bait Company, for the operation of a retail business for the sale of bait and tackle, convenience items, food, beverages, and fishing equipment and supplies at the building located at the Shelby Street Boat Launch Ramp Facility to extend the term through December 31, 2021, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Thank you. Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Whoops, is there anything you'd like to add? I think this is a great service to the community. We're extending the months of service, and the feedback that I've received is that their service down there has been well received and appreciated by the community.
That's well said.
Any discussion, Commissioners? If not, then Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the Commissioners on the motion first, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Would you present on item number 2, Mrs. Cresser?
Yes, item number 2 is an ordinance authorizing and directing the city manager to enter into a contract with Precision Paving Incorporated of Milan, Ohio, for the 2021 Community Development Block Grant Street Rehabilitation Project, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
I move for the adoption of this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
Then a motion and second. Discussion. Well, we've got a couple million out already, and another $250,000 in repaving is a good thing to see. So glad to see so many of the streets in the city getting repaved. It's fine. The teams have been out there, and they've been visible throughout the city. It's really remarkable how they get it done one at a time, and they stitch it all in, but it's looking really good. Further discussion, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Waddington.
Maybe I could ask Mr. Klein. I had 2 calls, and then I've noticed myself, and I thought in one of your emails, you said that there's a backlog on the sewers, or the inserts, because some of them dropped 6, 8 inches. And then I see recently we painted some of the exterior with white paint, but if you're driving at night, that's tough. Just wonder how long is that backlog going to be? And then,
Yeah, through the president to Commissioner Waddington, this is something that we've been on the contractor to handle, is that they did not get all of the steel in time, so they have paved all the roads. They plan to come back in, core them out. I don't know what the exact backlog is, but we are going to start giving them our stock so that they can replenish it and get those straightened out as quickly as possible. But I'm expecting them to be out here. I think last I heard was maybe this week or next to start on that work, but I can check and get back to you.
Mr. Klein, could you just explain to the public what it is we're dealing with? So when we put a new coat of asphalt on the old, let's say, manhole cover or valve cover, and that's now below the surface of the pavement, so they've got the contractor has to come out, cut that out, put a collar around it, and usually pour concrete around it or asphalt to make it level. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, that's exactly it. And this year, we noticed that it is different because typically what we're doing is we're milling out a certain depth, maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 3 inches. This year, we're milling out a little bit less at the center line of the road because we want to reestablish that crown for proper grading so that it does grade to the curbs and then into the catch basins. So we're milling less at the center, but we're going to add that 1.5 inches. Typically at the center of the pavement is where those manholes are. So in the past, it might be a 1/2 inch down. This year, it does look more dramatic, maybe 1.5 inches, and in some cases, 2 to 3 inches, that it does look that it is down. So the contractor will come back out. They have a coring machine where they'll come out, looks like a big hole saw. They'll drill it out, pull out the asphalt around it, put some brick and other rings in there to adjust it up to the grade. They'll put the new steel in, which is not just the lid, but also the casting around it. And that'll reestablish it right to the grade. They'll pour the concrete so that it's there and they're not getting any of the infiltration, and that it's at the exact elevation that it needs to be. There have been times in the past where contractors would do that prior to putting the surface on, but that doesn't work real well. They have to come back and adjust them anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
if I could do a quick follow-up. What about the crack sealing around the curbing? Because we're not doing curbs or gutters per se on a lot of these roads. I've ran around and looked at them, but the weeds, I had a complaint about that. And even on my end of town, there's a lot of that. Are they going to do any crack sealing follow-up on any of them?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Waddington, under this contract, we prioritized the asphalt surface, so we did not have the sealing of the joints at the edge of the pavement. But where there are those instances, I'll discuss that with our street crews and see if they can follow up with it later this fall and seal those joints.
Further discussion, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Cool.
just those joints that we're not sealing, what's the impact of that if they don't get sealed?
Mr. Klein.
Through the president to Commissioner Poole, this is typically, that's how the roads start deteriorating because the water gets in there in the winter, it freezes and starts popping out the concrete or the asphalt. So the longer you don't do that, if there is damage, if it's just thin joint, they're paving right up to it, it really isn't that impactful, but some of those gutter sections do have some damage at the joints already, and that's where the water will settle, and then it'll start expanding a lot more rapidly and deteriorate those gutters.
How big is this project? Since you indicated you think you're going to look to see if you can get us to do it, so I'm concerned about the urgency of making sure that it's accomplished.
Yeah, through the commission president, I don't have an answer to how big it is, but I can certainly get that from the engineer and the street department and figure out what's needed.
Okay, so we get it done.
In other words, Mr. Klein, wherever we have old pavement meeting, or I guess new pavement meeting curbs and gutters, that's where you'd be focused on.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments, commissioners? Mr. Cresser, would you poll the commission on the motion, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. Item number 3, please, Mrs. Cresser.
Yes, item number 3 is a resolution declaring the necessity for the city to proceed with the proposed Cedar Point Causeway Wetland Project, Phase 1, Project 1, and relating to the Sandusky Bay Initiative, approving the specifications and engineer's estimate of cost thereof, and directing the city manager to advertise for and receive bids in relation thereto, and declaring that this resolution shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Harris.
I move for the adoption of this resolution under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
There's a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Klein, I know we've discussed this on a number of previous occasions, but perhaps you could give the public and the commission a refresher on what this large project is going to be.
Yes, through the commission president. This project, if everybody recalls, maybe about 6 years ago, we got $1 million grant from the state of Ohio to look at something that was titled the Sandusky Bay Initiative. We looked at several options on water quality, habitat improvements, creating wetlands and things like that. This project was one of the 3 locations. It's the first phase of one of the 3 locations, and the goal of the project, the end game for this one, is to reduce the nutrient loadings within the bay, which means the phosphorus and the nitrogen that are causing algae blooms. It's also to create that habitat for fish and birds and other wildlife. We're hoping to, in the end, have fish spawning areas, and maybe that'll improve the fishing in the back bay and in the bay area. So there's really a multi-level component to this project, and I think with this community, and you know, the commission has always been so supportive of environmental, and knowing that the water in Lake Erie and Sandusky Bay is so critical, not only to the quality of life here, but to our water system, our water treatment, our wastewater treatment, and it's been wonderful for me to be able to work on projects like this that I'm so passionate about. Moving forward, what I know everybody's probably disappointed I didn't have another 30 to 40 minute presentation. I only have a couple slides that I wanted to just run through real quick to clarify some things. So this project is phase 1 of a 4-phase project. And this project, phase 1, is actually broken down into really 3 steps. The first step is going to be building the outer perimeter of the embankment area for the wetlands. The second step is going to be the Corps of Engineers coming in next summer after they dredge the Mosley Channel, which allows the shipping to the coal docks. Once that's dredged, they'll come back with the dredge material and put it in the rock embankment that we just created. That's going to dewater. I know that sounds weird in a bay, but it is going to dewater. It's going to settle. It's going to compact. We have at least 1 year worth of storage in there. We're hoping to get 2 years out of it. And once that dewaters and once it solidifies enough, then we'll get more money from the local or the state or federal government to go back out and reshape it. And that's when we're going to put all the plantings in, we're going to put the channels through it, create that habitat. So right now, it's not going to look like that. But what you can see, phase one is up here. And this was what was presented in 2017. That's on the screen now. And that shows that this phase really is immediately adjacent to the bay that is just west of the overflow parking lot for Cedar Point. So it's on the Causeway wetlands, it's on the west side of the wetlands, and it's right up against Cafferloo Island. And this was what was presented. It has the flows and the culvert, the flows through that culvert, and how in the end it was anticipated that it would be going through the channel. You can see that it could affect that flow getting between the back bay and the Sandusky Bay area. So as part of this project, because we knew that that was going to happen, this was actually how it was changed during the project. And then you can see it's coming through that culvert. I zoomed in on it, and this was again from 2017. I zoomed in on it, and the channel is really being routed kind of southerly. What we've changed here is on this one, it's harder to see, and I didn't have a zoomed in section, but you can see that that embankment wall within the bay is actually south of that culvert. And the reason for that was we wanted to make sure that the flow was getting through there. And we also added that the contractor, because there is going to be dewatering of that material and that type of stuff, that they would have to dredge that culvert, the opening of that culvert, and reestablish the grade of that culvert. So what you can see in this is it's really an enclosed area between Cafferloo Island and south of that culvert with an overflow, and this is what this project is going to end with. And I do want to be very clear as well that we are working with the Coast Guard and everybody else that we can possibly get involved, like ODNR, to make sure that we have signage, we have beacons, we have everything else that we need per law so the boaters don't run into this. Hopefully, it will be clear enough, with the bay levels and waves and things like that. We know that people, once you're getting through here, you might want to turn north, you might want to fish along there. People are probably used to just, in their bass boats, just slowly fishing along that bank. We want to make sure that everybody's aware. So we will be very upfront with people and give information out as needed. The other thing that we're doing as far as timeline, we are working our timeline around Cedar Point closing and opening next year so the contractor can move in, start the work late October timeframe, and then they have to be out of there by May so that they're not affecting the traffic, because the main access will be along Cedar Point Drive, which they've given us permission to use. And I don't think I have anything else.
Commissioners, questions or comments? Mr. Heil, let me ask you a question. I have this project is near my home. It's not immediately adjacent to my home. And it doesn't have any direct benefit to my wife or I. I have abstained in the past because I was concerned that someone might look at that and say, well, that doesn't quite seem right. But having already approved this, and the commission already having approved this without my vote, I view this as a funding issue, not an approval of the project issue. And I think I would be able to vote on this. I'm sorry to spring this on you at the last moment, but I wanted to get your opinion as to whether I should vote on this or whether I should abstain. And the issue is that, of course, if I have to abstain, we'd have to vote on this twice, and we would potentially delay the project.
I think in this instance where you're not actually receiving any, I think in this instance when you're not actually receiving a direct personal benefit, you may vote on this, obviously, if you decide to abstain for appearance sake. we understand that. But I don't think my recommendation to you is that you are not required to abstain.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion or comment, commissioners? Mrs. Cresser, would you poll the commission on the motion, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes. And now on the resolution.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That resolution is adopted. Mrs. Cresser, would you present the last item, please?
Yes, item number 4 is an ordinance accepting the material terms of the One Ohio subdivision settlement pursuant to the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding and consistent with the terms of the July 21, 2021 National Opioid Settlement Agreement, and declaring that this ordinance shall take immediate effect in accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Commissioners, having heard this communication, how do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
I move to adopt this ordinance under suspension of the rules in full accordance with Section 14 of the city charter.
Second.
There's been a motion and second. Discussion. Mr. Heil, will you be presenting this item, or how do you wish to proceed?
I can present. Our outside counsel is also present today if you have any questions for them.
However you wish to proceed.
Sure.
Fine.
So what you, through you, Commission President, what you have in front of you is a proposal for us to accept the state of Ohio's agreed upon settlement for numerous of the opioid, ongoing opioid litigation that is in a MDL in Cleveland. And this is a pretty public litigation where we've seen pretty much every governmental entity in the state of Ohio and across the country join together to sue certain manufacturers of opioids and distributors of opioids. What is the ordinance would allow today is it would direct myself and the city manager to agree to the agreed upon settlement that the state of Ohio, the Attorney General, and others in our council have negotiated. And it would allow for a direct allocation to the city of Sandusky. And then there is also a foundation that is set up for the region. Our region is 19, that would also provide some funds. All of these funds, the majority of these funds are tied to the remediation and dealing with issues related to the opioid epidemic. Both are direct funds that the city would receive, and then also any funds that would be dispersed through the foundation to the city or the region. And basically, this ordinance just directs us to enter, send them the required document, the participation form, indicating that we believe the settlement is acceptable. And then once enough participating litigating subdivisions indicate their acceptance, the settlement would become, it would trigger basically the settlement, and then how the agreement lays out, the disbursements would follow in the future.
Mr. Heil. Commissioners, questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Poole.
I have a question, but in terms of Mr. Heil, I think what the public needs to know is how much money are we likely to get, and what are we going to spend it on? Or what, do we have options to do with it?
Sure. Through you, Commission President, to Commissioner Poole, if enough of the participating subdivisions trigger the settlement, so the settlement becomes active, the direct allocation to the city of Sandusky would be $177,000 and some, approximately $170,000. It's a little more than $177,000. It could be more. It could be up to $254,000 directly allocated to the city of Sandusky over a number of years, depending on certain incentives that are triggered by subdivisions participating in the agreement. Regarding what it can be used on, the settlement agreement and the memorandum of understanding lays out in pretty great detail, actually kind of similar to our CARES Act or other funds we've received recently regarding calamities. There are certain expenses that qualify, and they're all related to the remediation of the opioid epidemic, or going forward, preventing it from happening in the future. So it's all related to things like drug treatment, education, public safety. There are a number of qualifying expenses, but that's kind of the overarching requirement, is that it has to be related to the remediating of the opioid epidemic.
Thank you.
Commissioners, additional questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman,
Fine.
Mr. Howe, you mentioned, I think there are divisions or whatever that they designated, I think, counties into. Do you know how they came up with those divisions?
I believe there are a number of regions. I don't know how they've decided what counties and what region.
Okay.
I don't know if our outside counsel wants to step to the podium. She might know better than I.
Hi.
Thank you.
Would you just state your name and address for the record for the clerk?
Yes, Leslie Murray, 1231 Wayne Street, Sandusky. Thank you, Commissioner. So our Attorney General participated in the negotiations. Just by kind of way of background, we are still in active litigation. There are over 3,000 townships, counties, and municipalities that brought suit against a number of the manufacturers and distributors and pharmacies. This settlement is the portion that is settling with the three main distributors, so McKesson, Cardinal, and Amerisource-Bergen, and then also Johnson & Johnson is the only manufacturer that's participating in this. I think it's the bulk of the settlement. The rest of the litigation will continue against the pharmacies and the other manufacturers, but these guys were really the players that had the most information and had the ability to abate and chose not to. There is also the Purdue settlement that is in a bankruptcy, so that's another section. So to answer your question that you posed, it's just a geographic division, so our region is kind of from Lorain County down, and then they pulled out two different categories. So we are in a non-urban category, so there's Cleveland, to Dayton, the larger cities are separate. So we're considered a non-urban rural category of a region. And then also there will be a determination later from the judge in the MDL, which happens to be in Cleveland, as to whether the initial plaintiffs that were put forward, which was Summit County, Cuyahoga County, whether they're going to be included. So
Okay.
they might be a separate track for them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Additional questions or comments, Commissioners?
Yeah, it's just like, was there an override, this region, I'm trying to figure out what it means. Is there money going to an overall region plus money going specific to entities like the township and the city?
Yes.
Correct.
So the way the settlement agreement was reached is there's two separate, sorry.
No, it's okay. You can go ahead. Go ahead.
There are two separate kind of buckets of money. So one is the bucket of money that goes to the state of Ohio and municipalities, townships, and counties. And that bucket is the bucket that we are allocated specifically if we reach the threshold of 80% participation, $177,000 in change. If we reach 95% threshold of participation, then we will get the $254,000 and change. The region is a foundation that was created, that will be created if there's enough participation and if the judge approves this settlement. None of this will happen unless there's an approval by Judge Polster.
Correct.
And so there is $19 million allocated to our region, Region 19, and that includes about 8 counties. And that's a completely different bucket, and it's not clear how that's going to be specifically allocated yet. There will be a board set up of I think it's 15 members through the governor, and the legislature will have some say in who sits on that board.
Okay, I read the material and I recognize that much of what you said. My interest is in that I recognize what we are giving, we control. And do you envision we should be, since the entire community at large, Erie County, the region at all, do you see interaction between the different entities in putting together projects of value that like mixing the money? Will we work together with Perkins? Could we work together with Perkins Township on something that benefits the entire area with both our monies.
Yes, I think.
That's what I'm interested in.
Oh, yes, I think that's
What
a
do you have?
political question for you. I think there's nothing that, in this, that would hold you back from that. The instruction that ties these funds is to do abatement, prevention, and remediation. So there's a lot of instruction about just doing healthcare, law enforcement, but also with the schools, education, outside organizations that deliver services to youth. So once the money's here, as long as it qualifies as one of those remediation, abatement, or prevention, you'd be able to work with others.
And if I may add on to that, it appears to be anticipated that proposals would be presented to the foundation board, similar to like a grant-making process, and that board would approve them. And there's, like Ms. Murray said, there should be nothing that stops us or other entities from working together to make proposals for specific projects to get funding from that foundation board.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, what I just recommend that when we get this and it all sorts out, that we do take advantage of the fact that the surrounding area also has money and start looking at the entire area of vacation land, county, or the township here, and what we can do together that'll have a major impact with this money. That's all.
Additional questions or comments, commissioners? Tyler, let me walk through this with you carefully because I don't want to upend the settlement being approved, but we're down 2 colleagues tonight. And ordinarily, because Leslie is my second cousin, I would not vote on this, but I do not have an economic tie to the settlement or to her law firm. And would like yours, Leslie is my second cousin, but I didn't say so. And if I may, I would like your direction in terms of whether or not I can or should abstain from, or can or should vote on this legislation.
I would, again, similar to the previous, since you don't have a direct financial benefit, you're not our attorney on this. And Leslie is not, I believe, is outside of the definition of a direct personal family member, which is usually your, immediate family, and then also people who have close personal financial ties to you, which, again, you're describing is not the case. So I would say that you are not required to abstain, but that decision is ultimately up to you, as always.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Murray. Cousin. Additional questions or comments, commissioners? Ms. Cressy, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
And now on the ordinance?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted. And that completes our regular items of business. And we will turn the meeting over to Mr. Whoopser for his city manager's report.
Thank you. Good evening, audience, commissioners, and staff. Sorry about that. Hold on. I'll start with the donations. First, a donation in the amount of $150 was received from Edward Taylor for the Washington Park and Greenhouse Fund. Ed wanted to thank the staff and volunteers who maintained our beautiful parks through the pandemic. I'd ask for a motion to accept that donation.
So moved.
Second.
Then a motion and second discussion. Without objection, the motion will be approved. And hearing no objection, the motion is approved with our thanks.
Thank you. For administration, and I want to make sure I state this clearly because there was a typo when this was sent to the commission over the weekend, but we fixed it. I would like to request a motion to affirm the appointment of Joey Subpoena to the Erie County Board of Health. Mr. Subpoena's term will be a 5-year term and run through December 31st, 2026. I'd ask for a motion to affirm that appointment.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and second discussion. Voice vote, Mrs. Cresser, or non-abstention? How can I do this one?
Roll call.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That appointment is confirmed.
Next, the police department. Austin Crosher and Brian Torres were recently sworn in as reserve officers with the department. Also, the police department wanted to thank the recreation department, the fire department, and the street department for their help in planning and coordinating the very successful Touch a Truck event that took place last Tuesday, August 3rd. A very special thank you to Eva Olcott and Annette Salat for their hard work ensuring the event was a success. And while I was out last week and didn't get a chance to attend, I've heard a lot of great feedback of how well the event went and that it was a huge hit once again for the community. Also, the police department will be participating in the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign throughout the state of Ohio from August 18th through September 6th. We encourage visitors and citizens to always use a designated driver to save lives. For Public Works, congratulations to Assistant Superintendent of Water Services, Bill Birch Jr., for receiving his Class 4 license with the Ohio EPA. This is wonderful news, as the residents and the staff are extremely fortunate to have Bill in this role. Also, a welcome to Bryson Babisak and John Mulgrew, who will both be joining the Sewer Maintenance Division of Public Works and Maintenance 2 positions, and an update on our resurfacing project, which is the largest local resurfacing project in the city's history. 77 or 51% of the planned 150 street segments have been paved. Utility adjustments, striping, and replacement of traffic loops are forthcoming on those already paved. For paving, the contractor will continue working his way eastward before going to the west end to address streets in that area. In addition, the Camp Street project is substantially complete with only a few punch list items remaining. For the building department, a welcome aboard to Paul Matthews, who started August 2nd as a plumbing inspector in the building department. Paul has over 20 years of experience in the plumbing trade. And for economic development, construction is resumed at the Fike Building, where new windows and doors started to be installed last week, and all tax increment financing agreements have been signed for the Hography Cook Building project, or the Hography Building. Staff is preparing the necessary submission documents for the state of Ohio to establish the TIF district. For community development, the department has completed acquisition of the vacant lot on Superior Street that was needed for the eventual extension of the Sandusky Bay pathway. And for planning and zoning, the Division of Planning continues to work on organizing a series of neighborhood meetings across the city. The first one will be on August 25th, and then on every subsequent Wednesday through September 29th for a total of 6 meetings. More information regarding times and locations will be publicized soon. An update that the next Arts and Culture Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 17th at 5:15. Landmark Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, August 18th at 5 p.m. Board of Zoning Appeals is scheduled for Thursday, August 19th at 4:30 p.m. And Planning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. For Sandusky Transit, they're still hiring multiple driver positions as well as a dispatcher. Applicants can apply directly through First Transit's website at www.firsttransit.com. And for recreation, Sandusky Rec will be hosting a free kids cruise 2021 in the Good Time 1 on August 16th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Dinner will be provided by Pizza House East before the cruise on the pier. This event will celebrate all the youth of Sandusky who participated in the vast amount of Sandusky Rec programs this past year before they start back to school. And I really want to thank Jason and Tondra and Annette and the entire recreation team and Jonathan, who made the suggestion that as part of the commission's support of the Good Time, that we held certain dates of the year for recreation and for youth of Sandusky. This will be a great time to get them out in the water and to say thank you to all of those before they head back to school for participating in our rec programs this year. If you want to find out more or sign up, you can go to www.cityofsandusky.com/recreation. Also, the Sandusky Recreation Division, Police Department, and Fire Department, this is going to be a little redundant, I realize, with the Touch a Truck. Everyone lend a helping hand to Touch a Truck. It was a great event, and Recreation wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone who helped make that possible, as well as the Police Department. And finally, Movies by the Bay is returning to the pier this week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'm not sure which movie. Does anybody know which movie we have Tuesday?
Moana?
Moana. Okay, well, that's a great one. So turn out for Moana this Tuesday at 7 p.m. Hopefully we'll have good weather. With that, that concludes my remarks for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions or take comments from the commission or others.
I'm going to tell you something about the youth of our city commissioner, that he knows one of the names of one of the most recent Disney movies.
It'll do it to you. They'll do it to you. You gotta stay up on it.
Probably haven't seen one of those in 10 years.
Tell them every Harry Potter movie, I'm sure, a book. So
I just want to iterate how great Touch a Truck was, and it's great to see it back. And I know our police and the fire departments were actively participating down there. And what was really great about it was all the other agencies around Erie County and from outside of Erie County participated. And it really was something that was a regional draw, much as Sandusky has become. It was a reflection of that, I think. And there were just all sorts of parents and kids there. And it was just great. So I'm very happy with that. Questions for city manager? Comments on this report or anything else? Ms. Wilson, you did note that work had started again on the Fike building because the windows are in. And I don't know that we have talked about that at these meetings, but so the public knows what had happened was all the windows for the Fike building came in and they were the wrong size. And there were some mistakes in the manufacturing process, so they had to send them back. So the same thing that happens to us at home when we get the thing that's the wrong size can happen in very big ways from Roos. So that's why their back is going the window. So glad to see that. Additional questions or comments for the city manager? If not, then are there any items of new business, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waddington.
I know there's only 5 of 7 of us here tonight, but I've been watching this new COVID variant that folks are getting sick. The state of Ohio is basically all red now, and I'm concerned with our budget. I know we got a nice bump from the feds, but maybe not hit the pause, but cautiously go forward as far as spending. I mean, because we don't know what's going to happen with the schools. We don't know what's going to happen. That changes every day, and I've been, watching a lot of this and reading about it in various newspapers. I have a concern that if we keep running at the pace we're going and we go into another shutdown, this time, businesses that made it last time, is the help going to be there? I mean, we're going to have debt that our great-great-grandkids are going to be paying, okay? I mean, you got to be realistic about that with all this, I don't want to call them giveaways, it's definitely helped out. But what if we take another tailspin? I'm not trying to say that this is going to happen, but maybe do we have something in place, a mechanism in place that we can watch this, say, hey, well, we better hit the brakes? That's just a concern of mine, and I'd like to know if anybody else on the commission here tonight had any thoughts on it.
And I'm concerned we're going to be back here in masks, mandatory masks at the next meeting or sometime in September. I mean, this Delta variant is just out of control. We haven't yet made it to 50% vaccination in Erie County. I'm terribly concerned about where all this is going. Personally, to answer your question, Mr. Waddington, and I guess Ms. Reeder, maybe we would welcome some dialogue from you or with you today or at the next meeting if we've caught you flat-footed. But, maybe we need to think about scenarios and maybe we could say, okay, where are we if we're down, 10% projected revenues over the balance of the year into the spring? And what does a 20% reduction look like? Because last year, we took a 39%, if I recall correctly, hit to our revenues. It wasn't as awful as we feared it could be, which we were looking at potentially as much as 50%, but it was pretty bad. And I know the revenues are down this year. We're not, we're in a strong position at the moment, but I wonder if maybe you could start that dialogue tonight, or we could look for some feedback along with Mr. Whoopser in terms of, where do we look like if we're down 10, 20%? What's our reserve? What's the ability to use the federal dollars to cover that?
Through the commission president to Commissioner Waddington, the rest of the commission, and Director Reeder, please do jump in. But Michelle and I had an opportunity to meet this morning to go over financials through July. And the good news is we're on track this year for a significant surplus at the end of the year is where things stand right now. And that is based not on revenue coming in higher, which it's not. It's coming in much higher than we had projected for 21 because we projected for revenue to be comparable to 2020. It's coming better than that. It is lower than 2019, which was the last year before we had COVID. But what Director Reeder and the rest of the directors have done is done an amazing job of keeping our expenses down, and we've been cautious and deliberate in bringing expenses back online. And a lot of the larger expenses that we've made, like the resurfacing project, for example, are coming from the stimulus. And I know that our current draft of the stimulus, which we hope to have, and part of what we're doing is waiting to see kind of where the budget goes. We hope to have in front of the commission in September and October a little bit more direct detail. Right now, we are holding a relatively significant amount of that stimulus to replace lost revenue, and that is one of the eligible expenses. So we are definitely being deliberate as we bring expenses back to a pre-COVID level, and we'll, for project-related expenses, do our best to use those sort of one-time revenues that exist, and also make sure that there's enough in there that we can continue to replace revenue that is lost to maintain staffing levels. But I think Commissioner Waddington is right on that. We don't know what's going to happen. In fact, that's one thing Michelle said to me earlier today is, things look really good as of right now. And fortunately, we have that surplus, that even if things go down, it would eat into what is a projected surplus currently. We don't know what's going to happen the rest of this year because of what's happening, and hopefully that surplus gives us a little bit of a cushion and the stimulus gives us a little bit more. But I think that absolutely prudence is something that we need to think about, and Director Reeder, feel free to add anything to that.
Thank you. The only thing I would add is at the end of July, we were at 59% of what we budgeted for revenue. So again, we're right on target. We reduced our revenue this year compared to where we would normally be at. So we are being conservative and making sure we're not spending money before we actually have received it. So we've slowed things down on the expense side to account for that.
Mr. Reeder, I don't recall this particular number from your most recent report, which I think was a month before that I saw that, but you had a projected surplus for the year end, I believe. Instead of couching the question that way, what is your present expectation in terms of what our surplus, that is the amount we received in revenue, not counting the stimulus funds, less our expenses, is going to be at the end of this year?
So at the end of last year, we were just over $4 million. We look to target to be above $4 million again this year. We expect to be between $4 million and $5 million. Again, depends on what happens and what is allocated for expenditures. If there are projects or something that we want to move forward with at the end of the year after we've received the revenue, we'll take a look at that.
So what I was driving at, and I think you've answered that question, but I want to make sure I have it right. What I was driving at is, I think what you're telling us is that given where things are now and understanding they could change, our revenues, not counting stimulus dollars, should be about $1 million more than our expenses. So we've got that built-in cushion. And then as Mr. Woopser is pointing out, we've got the stimulus dollars available to cover, and they're in the bank, available to cover
50%.
additional shortfall. Yeah, for this year, the $9 million plus is in the bank. So that gives me some comfort, Mr. Waddington, but I'm glad we're having this discussion because I don't know where we're going to be.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Spool.
Yeah. The money that you said, that does not include stimulus dollars?
Correct. This is just the general fund.
This is just general dollars. I agree with Mr. Waddington, actually. Having a surplus at the end of this year because we didn't do very much, we just didn't spend anything. That means we got services that the public did not receive. That means there are many, many things that we didn't do. This is what got us into the problem that we were in prior to this, which was the years we went where we didn't spend any money on capital improvements. We didn't do a lot of things. So it's not a positive that we're going to have $4 million at the end of the year and suggest that we can just add personnel and other things of that nature just because you have a revenue surplus. It's like, where did you cut? It's what did we do without? I echo what Mr. Waddington said. Going forward, every dime you spend, we need to talk about what do we benefit from it and how do we increase our revenues. We were losing revenue before COVID. Our revenues went down every year, 18, 19, and 20. So our population has gone down. So the idea of saying just because I've got 2 quarters in my pocket today, when I'm not doing anything to generate more money, the revenues are not growing, and you just tell me just don't eat for 3 days in a row, and I'll still have more money left in my pocket, because that's really what we're saying. Cutting back on the services that we're supposed to provide to people when we should be trying to get people to move to Sandusky, it's not enough. We have to pay closer attention, just as Mr. Waddington suggests, to what we spend our money on. You just can't be spending it as we have been on things that look nice, make us feel good. I agreed to go with free movies for the community because I recognize it stimulates interest in the community and so forth. But bringing more tourists in here and not bringing more residents doesn't get it. It is enough said. So I don't accept the fact that we're going to have a balance at the end of the year as enough to continue just the way we're going.
Could I quickly just
Real quick, Mr. Wiltshire, if I may. So, Mr. Poole, I just want to I know you know the distinction, but I want to make sure the public didn't get a little bit confused as we're all talking about these
Okay.
things together. So we've always carried a positive cash balance, a surplus, if you will. It's not really a surplus, it's like with the money in our checking account, and we got a bad bond rating, as you know, because we've talked about this many years, if that goes too low. So the $4 to $5 million is that amount of money. That's what's necessary to keep cash on hand in order
Yes.
to be able to meet our obligations in any emergencies. So I just want to make sure the public understood that. This is not a year where we're going to get $5 million more in revenues than we have in expenses. So, but I know you know.
Oh,
that.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely correct. And the point here is paying attention to what we spend our money on, because that's what matters. We've been dealing with declining revenues for several years, and we've been spending, hoping that those investments would make Sandusky a great place to be and more people would come in. So what's past was past. But I have to recognize that we need to take a pause to evaluate whether the money we've invested is bringing us additional revenue or whatever other benefits that you want to talk about before we keep spending money. And that's really it.
Mr. Wobser, you want to add something?
Thank you, Acting Commission President Murray. To Commissioner Poole, I just want to clarify, though, that we have been making investments throughout the entire city, particularly in our neighborhoods and in our housing stock, and that the housing market currently in Sandusky is the strongest that it's been in decades. And in addition to that, the percentage increases in residential investment in Sandusky is greater than the rest of Erie County on a percentage basis for the first time in decades. And that while we had flattened out, we had a major increase in revenue from 2015 to 2016 to 2017. And what had happened is a flattening out in 18 and 19, but actually 2020's adopted budget was a record budget adopted and a record first quarter for the city of Sandusky pre-COVID. So I just want to be clear that there's been hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in neighborhoods, in housing stock, yes, in tourism assets, but also in other investments. And we have certainly undertaken a dramatic shift with COVID on our revenue, but I don't think there is any evidence. If you look at our housing market, if you look at the investment climate in the city, which are the biggest drivers of your future, that our investment strategy has been working and has gotten a lot of attention from outsiders that are looking to continue to invest in the city.
Yeah, it's always such a hard thing, Mr. Wobser, in terms of knowing what the return on investment is. Cities and states aren't like private entities. We have a long view, and we don't necessarily know, on a line-by-line basis, calculate ROI in terms of what investment is, but you're right to point those things out. So we are on new business, I think. Other items of new business. I have one, Commissioners, and if you don't want to proceed, I'm fine with this, but as you learned recently, we've got a couple of vacancies on the Landmark Commission. We have, and I don't mean to decide the whole resident versus non-resident issue tonight. We can talk about that. I think that maybe there's a feeling that we want to have that discussion when we've got a full bench. And to make those decisions. But at the moment, the issue is that we need to make sure that the Landmark Commission can act on the applications before it. We have two applications that we've received from residents who are very qualified. One is a longtime member of the Erie County Historical Society and an ardent preservationist. And the other young man is an architect who has recently moved to the area who has long experience in rehabilitating historic buildings, or I should say a great experience in representing or rehabilitating historic buildings. Those two individuals are Lou Schultz and Robert Trucka. And in order to be able to keep the business of the historic or the Landmark Commission moving forward, I wonder if one of you would feel comfortable making a motion to appoint those members for the vacancies for the terms that expire at the end of this year. So it's not a long-term commitment, it's just to the end of this year.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
I move that we accept or appoint Louis Schultz to the Landmark Committee. I think they have to be done separately.
All right, that's fine.
Second.
On a motion and second, discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Twine.
Yes, I know we had a long discussion at our last meeting in reference to the Landmark Commission and the makeup and the membership, and I asked that we look at all of our boards and commissions. I'm fine with these two appointments tonight, because as you mentioned, we do still need to continue the business. But I think longer term, it is something worth looking into. Then especially, they are both citizens of the city, so I support that.
Additional comments or
Mr.
questions?
Chairman,
Mr. Poole.
you're correct that both of them are extremely, or I should say Mr. Schultz, they're both qualified. Mr. Schultz is extremely qualified. I did speak to him this afternoon, and I look forward to his input on that Landmark Commission. I think he'll bring some balance to the conversation, and he's quite knowledgeable.
He will bring the level of levity.
Yes.
Increase the level of levity at the Landmark Commission meetings, too. He's a pretty funny guy. Okay, unless there are further questions or comments, Mrs. Crusher, let's poll the commissioners, please.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington? Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes. That appointment is made, and now commissioners on the appointment of Mr. Trucca. Would someone care to make a motion to appoint him to the Landmark Commission?
I support that nomination to the Landmark Commission.
I will take that as a motion.
Second.
Motion, second, discussion. Ms. Crusher, would you poll the commissioners on the motion, please?
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Ms. Twine?
Yes.
Mr. Waddington?
Yes.
Mr. Poole?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
That appointment is approved and made. Additional items of new business. Any items of old business? Is there anyone present who wishes to present to the City Commission on an item of city business? Mrs. Crusher, did we receive any comments from the public that they asked to be read at tonight's meeting?
No, Mr. Chairman, we did not.
So, Commissioners, lacking any further business that I know of, if someone would care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.